I was 25 the first time I flew alone. Not my first flight ever. Just the first one without someone waiting in the seat beside me. It was a red-eye from Denver to Boston. Flight 381, American Midwest Airlines, Gate B23, scheduled to depart at 11:17 p.m. I'd booked the ticket last minute after getting a call from the rehab center where my brother was checked in. He'd relapsed. Again. This time, they said he'd tried to walk into oncoming traffic near the exit ramp. Alive, but barely. I was already running on empty. My job as a line cook at a steakhouse in downtown Denver barely paid enough for rent, and I hadn't spoken to my brother Brian in 3 months. Not since I told him I couldn't keep bailing him out. But family's family, right? When the center called, I packed a duffel, called out sick, and bought the cheapest seat I could find. That's how I ended up in 18A, window seat, back of the plane, boarding under humming fluorescent lights while a storm rolled over the mountains. The kind of storm that doesn't shout with thunder, just flickers silently in the distance like a warning. It was late and everyone looked dead tired. Business travelers, a few families, college kids in hoodies. The usual crowd, except for the man in 17C. I noticed him right away, because he noticed me. He was already seated when I walked past. Tall, maybe mid-50s, with sharp cheekbones and a too-thin face. He wore an olive green windbreaker zipped up to his throat, though the plane was warm, and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. But it was the way he looked at me, eyes tracking my every step down the aisle, that sent a flicker of something cold through my chest. Not just a glance, a stare, too still, too aware. I forced myself not to react, slid into my seat, plugged in my headphones, and tried to lose myself in a podcast. We took off late. Turbulence rocked us almost immediately. By the time the captain's voice came over the intercom, expecting rough air through Kansas should smooth out by Ohio. Half the passengers were either nodding off or gripping their armrests. Me? I couldn't stop glancing forward. 17 degrees Celsius, still staring. At one point he turned in his seat, leaned just enough that I caught his profile. He was talking to someone, but there was no one in 17A or 17B. His lips moved soundlessly, jaw working like he was whispering or praying. I looked around, half expecting someone else to notice. Nobody did. The flight attendant passed and I almost said something. But what could I say? Hey, this guy's weirding me out. He hadn't done anything, not really. And I didn't want to be that guy. Paranoid, judgmental, twitchy in the middle of a packed plane. So I sat back, closed my eyes, and drifted. I don't know how long I was out. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe more. But I woke up with a jolt when someone screamed. Loud, raw. A woman's voice from the front. Everyone sat up, blinking, confused. The lights flickered. Then a flight attendant rushed past, nearly stumbling over the drink cart. More shouting from up front. I unbuckled, craning my neck. Passengers ahead were standing, trying to see. A man in row 12 was waving his arms, shouting something about the guy in the bathroom. I didn't understand it all, just bits and pieces. He's been in there 20 minutes. He said there's someone else inside. I heard 2 voices. Swear to God. The crew tried to calm things down, told everyone to remain seated, but no one listened. It felt like the tension on board had gone from casual to electric in under a minute. Then the bathroom door opened, and the man from 17C stepped out. Or at least, I thought it was him. But his face didn't look right. His hat was gone. His eyes looked glassy, bloodshot. The collar of his jacket was soaked in sweat, or something darker. He walked with a limp, dragging 1 foot behind him. But it was the look on his face that made the air in my lungs freeze. Like he wasn't quite there. Like someone else was driving. He walked past the flight attendant without a word, without blinking. And then without warning, he lunged at a man in 14D, just pounced. The 2 of them went crashing into the seats. Screams erupted. A child started crying. Another man jumped in, trying to pull him off. The attacker thrashed, howling in some guttural voice that didn't sound real. The flight attendant shouted for the air marshal. But this flight didn't have one. I didn't think. I just unbuckled and ran forward with a few others, grabbing at the man's arms, legs, anything to restrain him. He was strong, unnaturally so, but we managed to pull him off. A man in first class tossed down zip ties and we used them on his wrists. He didn't fight them. He just started to smile. And then he said it. "There's more than one of me." We didn't understand. Not then. But the lights overhead flickered again. The turbulence got worse. And that's when the second man screamed, this time from the back of the plane. Row 23. A kid, maybe 20 years old, slumped against the window, blood dripping from his nose. His seatmate was pounding on the call button, shouting for help. When we rushed over, the kid started to convulse. Violently, a flight attendant dropped the first aid kit, tried to stabilize him, but he thrashed so hard it took 3 of us to keep him in the seat. Then he stopped and looked straight at me, right into my eyes, and in the same deep, unnatural voice said, "We warned you not to fly at night." That's when I knew this wasn't a hijacking. It wasn't drugs or psychosis, it was something else. The plane descended into chaos. The crew tried to keep order, but more passengers began showing symptoms. Blank stares, blood from the nose or eyes, whispered words that made no sense. "Don't look in the clouds. Altitude is a lie. We live in the metal bird now." Whatever it was, it spread, like a sickness or a possession. We moved anyone acting strange to the rear galley, zip-tied, guarded by 3 passengers who volunteered. But there were too many. We lost track. One woman opened the emergency exit door near the back. She didn't scream as she was sucked out. The cabin pressure alarm howled. Oxygen mask fell. People panicked, clawed for the overhead panels, sobbing into the plastic. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I just kept repeating, "This isn't real. This can't be real." But it was. By the time the captain came on the intercom again, his voice sounded strange, stilted, like he was choosing every word carefully. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "we've been selected. There is no return. Please remain calm." That's when I realized it had gotten to the cockpit. They were in control. The plane began to climb, higher than it should. I checked the flight tracker on the screen. Altitude, 53,000 feet, then 57, then 61. Commercial planes don't fly that high. My skin felt wrong, like my blood was boiling beneath it. My vision blurred. People began passing out. I stumbled down the aisle toward the cockpit, pounding on the door. No answer. So I grabbed the fire extinguisher and swung. Twice. 3 times. The door cracked open. What I saw inside haunts me still. The pilot and co-pilot were dead, but they were smiling, and the controls were moving on their own. No hands on the throttle, no feet on the rudder, just invisible motion, like the plane was flying itself. In the reflection on the cracked glass of the cockpit, I saw something behind me, a shape, tall, thin, eyes like headlights. I turned. Nothing there. I turned back, and the cockpit was empty. I don't remember much after that. I woke up in a hospital outside Pittsburgh 2 days later. They told me the plane had made an emergency landing in a field outside Lancaster. Only 31 people survived. No one could explain what happened. The black box was corrupted. No radio contact had been made for the last hour of the flight. The pilot was found strapped into his seat, dead from a heart attack. Co-pilot too. And everyone in rows 15 through 23, gone. No trace, not even blood. They said it was a freak incident, oxygen malfunction, mass hysteria. But I know what I saw, what I heard. I saw the man in 17C again, 3 months later. I was walking to my brother's rehab meeting in Boston. He passed me on the street. Same windbreaker, same limp. But his eyes weren't his anymore. He didn't speak. He just smiled and whispered, "There's more than one of me." Story 2. I used to think I was a good judge of people. You kind of have to be when you grow up the way I did. I was raised in a 2-bedroom duplex outside of Dayton, Ohio, by a single mom who worked night shifts at the hospital and still managed to make my lunch every morning. When your mom's a nurse in the ER, you learn pretty fast how to read faces, how to sense when someone's hiding pain or when someone's about to snap. That instinct helped me survive college, my first serious relationship, and even 5 years working in customer service, which I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. By the time I turned 29, I'd clawed my way into a better life, a salaried job in Austin doing remote IT support for a logistics company. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well, and most days I could work in my pajamas with a cup of coffee and my dog Bentley at my feet. I just started traveling again, something I hadn't done much since COVID shut everything down. That's what this flight was supposed to be, a quick trip to Portland to see my older brother Matt and his family. Just 4 hours and change, window seat, Southwest Airlines, Flight 381 out of Austin Bergstrom. I remember how ordinary everything felt when I boarded. That's what sticks with me the most. There was no eerie foreshadowing, no dramatic music in the background. Just the stale scent of recycled air, the thump of roller bags, and a crying baby 3 rows behind me. I was in 14A near the wing, the window seat. I always booked window seats, not because I loved the view, but because it gave me the illusion of control. Like if something went wrong, I'd at least see it coming. He was already sitting in 14B when I arrived. Pale guy, late 30s, maybe early 40s. Dark hoodie, hands in his lap. Nothing really remarkable about him, except that he didn't look up when I got to the row. Didn't shift his legs to make room. Just sat there staring straight ahead like he didn't even notice me. I forced a polite smile and said, "Hey, excuse me, that's me in the window." He slowly turned, blinked, then stood without a word. He was taller than I expected, had to duck to avoid hitting his head on the overhead bins. I slid past him quickly, grateful when I sat down. "Thanks," I added. He didn't respond. Just sat back down, elbows pressed tight to his sides, eyes forward. No book, no phone, nothing in his hands. Whatever. Some people just don't like flying. We took off a few minutes late. Once the plane leveled out, I settled into my usual flying ritual. Headphones in, lo-fi playlist, and Kindle open to the latest thriller. That's when I noticed him glancing at me. Not full-on staring, just these tiny sideways looks. At first I brushed it off. Could have been my imagination. But then I noticed his hands, trembling slightly, fingers twitching against his thighs like he was trying to stop them from moving. His breathing wasn't labored exactly, but there was a rhythm to it. Shallow inhales, slow exhales, like someone trying to keep their heart rate down. I told myself maybe he was just anxious. Maybe he hated flying. Hell, I used to be that person. So I smiled again, tried to offer a little warmth. "First time flying?" I asked. He blinked once, twice. Then, without turning to face me, he said, "I've been on this route before." His voice was low and even, but something about it made the hairs on my arms rise. Flat, emotionless. Like he wasn't talking to me, but reciting something he'd memorized. "Oh," I said, awkward now. "Cool." I turned back to my Kindle. We were 2 hours in when things started to get weird. I went to the bathroom at the front of the plane. When I came back, he was sitting back in his seat, but his hoodie was pulled tighter over his head. I slid into my seat, then froze. My Kindle was open, but not to my book. It was on the home screen. I hadn't left it that way. I picked it up, heart pounding, and checked my recent reads. Nothing out of place, but still, I hadn't closed out of my book. He didn't look at me, didn't speak. I told myself maybe I'd bumped the screen. Maybe I was being paranoid. But then the flight attendant came by with drinks, and while I ordered ginger ale, he didn't say anything. Didn't make eye contact, just stared straight ahead like she wasn't there. When she passed, I turned slightly toward him. "Hey, are you okay?" He didn't answer. His hands were clenched now, knuckles pale. And for just a second, I thought I saw his lips move, mouthing something. I leaned in slightly, straining to hear. 38,100 feet. I blinked. "Sorry, what?" He turned his head, finally, and looked at me properly. His eyes were a washed-out gray, no life behind them. "We're at 38.1, he whispered. I felt ice spread through my chest. "How do you—" "I track flight data, GPS, barometric pressure." "Right." I turned back to my window, trying not to show how rattled I felt. There are plenty of aviation nerds, I told myself. He was just one of them. But then he said, "This is the altitude they all go missing." What? He nodded just once. 38.1. That's when it happens. You won't feel it. Not really. Just a slip, a drift, a frequency outside what we can detect. And then, gone. I felt my throat go dry. I hit the call button. The attendant came over a minute later. Blonde, mid-30s, tight smile. "Everything okay here?" she asked. I gave her a tight smile back. "Could I maybe switch seats if there's a spare?" She glanced at the man beside me, who now had his eyes closed and was muttering softly. "I'll check," she said, eyes narrowing. She returned a few minutes later. "Only seats left are middle ones." I almost said yes anyway, but I didn't want to make a scene. I figured we had maybe an hour left. I could manage. But the murmuring didn't stop. In fact, it got louder. Fragments of sentences, equations, numbers, names. At one point, I swear I heard him say my name. I hadn't told it to him. That's when I started to panic. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app. Typed, "This man is saying strange things." I think he went through my Kindle. Please keep an eye on him. Row 14. I showed it to the flight attendant the next time she passed. Her face changed. She gave a quick nod and disappeared. 5 minutes later, one of the flight crew, a tall guy in uniform with a serious face, came and crouched beside our row. "Sir," he said to the man beside me, "mind stepping to the back for a quick chat?" The man didn't respond. "Sir?" He slowly opened his eyes and smiled. But it wasn't a smile. It was something else. A baring of teeth, a threat in the shape of a grin. "I'd rather stay seated," he said, and then he reached into his hoodie. I don't remember screaming, but apparently I did. The whole cabin tensed. Passengers turned. Phones came out. The crew lunged. Two of them dragged him out of his seat. He didn't fight, didn't shout, just whispered over and over like a chant. 38-1, 38-1, 38-1. They held him at the back of the plane for the remainder of the flight. I could see him from where I sat. He just stood there, still as a corpse, whispering. We landed without incident. Police were waiting at the gate. They escorted him off first. Never got his name. Never saw him again. But here's the part that still haunts me. 2 days later, I got a package. No return address. Inside was a flash drive, and on that flash drive, footage of me, sleeping, reading, showering. The videos were taken through my apartment window, weeks worth. But the last one was different. It was taken from above. The angle was impossible, like it had been shot from the ceiling, like a camera had been hidden in my attic. It ended with static and one final frame of text. Altitude doesn't matter when you're already marked. I moved the next day, changed my number. Got a restraining order against nobody because I had no name to give them. To this day, I don't know how he found me, or why. But sometimes when I'm flying, when the plane levels off and we hit that quiet, perfect cruising altitude, I hear it, a whisper, right behind me. 38-1, and I wonder if I'll ever land again. Story 3, I never liked flying. Not because I was afraid of heights or turbulence or anything logical like that. No, for me it was the silence. That sterile, heavy hush that settles over a plane after takeoff, broken only by the occasional ding of the seatbelt sign or the hiss of recycled air. I don't know, something about being sealed in a metal tube 38,000 feet above the ground with 200 strangers just always felt unnatural. But that's what I was doing on the night of June 14th, 2023, when I boarded Flight 381 out of Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, heading to Charlotte. My name is Marcus Hill. I'm 27 years old. I used to live in Tacoma, Washington, in a one-bedroom apartment over a laundromat on East 34th. Before this flight, my life was pretty unremarkable. I worked as a freelance graphic designer, mostly for small businesses. Menus, flyers, logos, the kind of stuff you scroll past without noticing. I had friends, sure, a girlfriend once, but that ended last winter when she moved to Oregon. I had a rhythm, wake up, work, watch something dumb on Netflix, sleep. What I didn't have was a reason to leave, until my mom called. Dad had collapsed in the garage. Heart attack. He survived, but barely. They were keeping him at a hospital in Charlotte. She sounded small on the phone, like someone had taken all the breath out of her. So I booked a red-eye, packed a single backpack, and headed east. Flight 381 was scheduled to depart at 11:55 p.m. And as usual, the gate was full of tired-looking people clutching coffees or nodding off against their luggage. I remember there was a crying toddler in a pink jacket, a guy in a business suit pacing while talking loudly on Bluetooth, and an older woman who smelled strongly of lavender and had way too many plastic bags. It was a full flight. Boeing 737. Window seat for me, 22A. Middle seat next to me was taken by a college kid. Couldn't have been more than 19, all acne and AirPods. He barely looked up when I sat down. The aisle seat was empty. For a while. Right before they closed the doors, someone slipped in. A man, tall, probably 6'2", wearing a gray windbreaker, jeans, and one of those black cloth face masks people still wore post-COVID. His hood was up, even though it wasn't raining. He didn't say anything, just sat down. I didn't think much of it at first. People are weird, especially on planes. But by the time we hit cruising altitude, I started to notice something off. For one, he never moved, not even when the drink cart came by. Didn't look at the flight attendant, didn't gesture or speak, just kept his face turned slightly toward the seat in front of him. I tried not to stare, but something about his stillness unnerved me. You know that feeling you get when someone is watching you, even if you're not looking at them? It felt like that. Halfway through the flight, I turned to grab my water bottle from under the seat, and that's when I saw it. He had no shoes, just socks, gray, filthy socks. Like he'd been walking around outside for days. And his jeans? They had what looked like dried mud caked around the cuffs. I sat back up slowly. My pulse kicked up a notch. I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to my mom. On the plane. Land in 3 hours. Love you. I didn't say anything about the guy. I didn't want to sound paranoid, but something about him gnawed at the back of my brain. Eventually, I closed my eyes and tried to sleep. I don't know how long I was out, but I woke to the sound of movement. That strange man was gone. The aisle seat was empty. I looked around. No sign of him in the bathroom line. No one standing. I pressed the call button. A flight attendant appeared a moment later. A woman in her 30s, cheerful but tired looking. Everything okay? She asked. Yeah, just the guy who was sitting here, and I said, pointing to the empty seat. Do you know where he went? She looked at it and frowned. I don't think anyone was seated there, sir. What? No, he was definitely here. Tall guy, gray hoodie, mask. He boarded late. She glanced down at the tablet in her hand, tapped something. 22C was unassigned this flight. I stared at her. That can't be right. He was here the whole first half. I saw him. I swear. Her polite expression faltered slightly. Maybe someone moved around before takeoff. It happens. Would you like some water? I shook my head. Number thanks. She left and I just sat there, heart thudding in my ears. Maybe he had moved. Maybe I was tired and misremembering. I tried to calm myself. I was not going to be that guy who freaked out on a plane. I put my headphones in and leaned back. But then I looked down. There were footprints, barely visible on the dark carpet. 2 smudged, oval-shaped dirt prints, leading away from the seat, toward the back of the plane. I looked back over my shoulder. The rear lavatory door was shut. I stared at it for what felt like an hour. But no one came out, and no one went in. Eventually, the fasten seatbelt sign lit up. The captain's voice came on, saying we were beginning our descent. I looked again. Still no sign of the man. Still no one had exited the rear lavatory. I leaned toward the college kid next to me. Hey, man, I said. Did you see the guy sitting here earlier? He pulled one AirPod out, annoyed. What guy? There was a guy in the aisle seat for the first few hours. Tall, hoodie, face mask. He blinked. No offense, dude, but I've been asleep since takeoff. He put the AirPod back in and turned away. When we landed in Charlotte, I was the last one off the plane. I waited as the aisle cleared, then stopped by the rear bathroom. I knocked. No answer. I flagged down another flight attendant. Hey, can you check the rear lavatory? I think someone might still be in there." She gave me a curious look, but agreed. She knocked, waited, then unlocked it with a key. Empty, spotless, like no one had ever been there at all. I should have let it go. I should have walked off that plane and into my mom's waiting arms and never thought about it again. But I didn't. 2 nights later, I was sitting in Dad's hospital room. He was still asleep. My mom had gone home to shower. I couldn't stop thinking about the man. So I pulled up a forum I sometimes read, one of those online spaces where people share weird experiences, UFOs, ghosts, glitches in reality. I didn't believe most of it, but I needed to write it down, to get it out of my head. I titled the post, "The Man in Seat 22C." Within minutes, replies flooded in, and one of them changed everything. It was from a user named FlightObsRVA. Their comment read, "Are you sure it was Flight 381? There was a crash back in 2015, same flight number, Seattle to Charlotte. A man matching that exact description was listed among the victims." Seat 22. See, my hands went cold. I searched the crash. It was real. June 14th, 2015. Flight 381 went down over the Rockies due to engine failure. No survivors. One of the victims, Caleb Dean, age 34. Seat assignment 22C. I found a photo. It was him. Same hoodie, same face, same eyes. I don't know how to explain it. I don't know what he wanted or why I saw him. But a week later, I got another message on that forum from a user named Seatwatcher. All it said was, "He sits with the ones who don't want to be forgotten." Since then, I've flown 3 times. Every time I check the seat map. Every time I avoid 22C, and every time I wonder if someone else is sitting there. Story 4. I hadn't spoken to my sister in nearly 4 years when I booked the ticket to Portland. Not because we had some dramatic falling out. No screaming match. No betrayal. Just the slow, quiet corrosion that happens when grief settles into the cracks of a family and calcifies into something permanent. She and I were close once. Real close. Late-night phone calls from our dorms, inside jokes that made our mom roll her eyes. But after our dad died, it was like she started speaking a language I didn't understand anymore. Everything felt sharp with her, like every word had a blade buried in it. So when she messaged me out of the blue asking if I could come help her move out of our childhood home, it stopped me cold. I stared at the text for a long time. "I can't do it alone. Please, Matt, one weekend." I almost said no. I had every reason to. But something in me, it wasn't forgiveness, not quite, just didn't want to regret it. So I booked a flight out of Dallas direct to Portland. Just one carry-on, just a weekend. Flight 381, 6:20 p.m. departure. I remember that number now, like people remember the moment before an accident. The airport was chaos. It always is. But I'd flown enough times to move through it mechanically. ID, shoes off, laptop out, nod to the TSA agent like we were in on some joke. My gate was near the end of the terminal, squeezed between a McDonald's and one of those overpriced magazine kiosks that sells $11 gum. I was early, so I found an empty seat near the window and put in my headphones. Music didn't help. My mind kept looping around the same thoughts. How much would she have changed? What did she want from me? Could I even do this? "Boarding group 2, a voice called. That was me. I joined the line, carry-on slung over one shoulder. The woman in front of me smelled like vanilla lotion. Behind me, someone cleared their throat repeatedly. When I stepped onto the plane, I didn't feel it yet. That weird edge, that tension. The flight attendant greeted me with a too bright smile. I nodded, barely registering her as I moved down the narrow aisle, looking for 19A. Window seat, my favorite. I liked watching the ground fall away. The middle seat stayed empty. Just for a moment, then he got on. Dark hoodie, shaggy brown hair, pale skin, but not in an unhealthy way. Just sort of colorless. He had a duffel bag slung across his chest and earbuds jammed in his ears. No eye contact, no acknowledgement. He sat down beside me in 19B, and that should have been the end of it. Just another guy on a flight. Just 2 hours, 20 minutes to Portland. But then he turned. Hey, he said, smiling. You're Matt, right? My stomach dropped. Nope. Yeah. Sorry, do I know you? He laughed quietly, like I'd said something funny. Nah, you don't know me. I just recognized you. I gave him a polite nod and turned to face the window. That should have been the end of it. People talk on planes. Sometimes they overshare. No big deal. But he didn't stop. You're going to Portland? He asked. Yeah. Family? I didn't answer. He leaned in slightly, not enough to touch, but just enough to shrink the space between us. I used to live there. You know the Eastmoor district? I nodded automatically. I didn't like how he looked at me, like he knew something I didn't, like we had some connection he wasn't telling me about. He kept smiling. The plane took off without delay. Outside, the sun slipped lower on the horizon, casting orange streaks across the clouds. I tried to relax, but I couldn't. He kept fidgeting, adjusting his hoodie, tapping his knee. I could hear faint music leaking from his earbuds, some droning ambient sound, not even a beat, just noise. I noticed something else too. He wasn't looking out the window, or at the seatback screen, or his phone. He was watching me, not always directly, sometimes in the reflection of the window, or when I shifted in my seat. But I felt it. Eyes that lingered too long. About an hour in, I finally turned to him. Hey, do we know each other from somewhere? He grinned wider. Maybe. That was it. That was his answer. Look, man, I said, lowering my voice. You're kind of freaking me out. He blinked, tilting his head. I'm just being friendly. Number. You're being weird. He stared at me for a beat too long, then chuckled like he'd just remembered something. Did you ever have that dream? He asked. What dream? The one where you're on a plane and something's wrong. Like you can't move, can't speak. Everyone's calm, but you know something's wrong. I didn't answer. He leaned closer. His breath smelled faintly of mint and something bitter underneath. I've had that dream every night since I was 12. I pressed the call button. He sat back, chuckling again, like this was all some joke to him. The flight attendant came over a few seconds later. I asked quietly if I could change seats. She glanced between us, hesitating. I'm sorry, she said. It's a full flight. Of course it was. Everything all right, gentlemen? She asked. He smiled up at her. Peachy. The attendant gave me a polite nod and walked away. The plane hit turbulence about 30 minutes later. One of those sudden lurches that makes your stomach jump and your thoughts stutter. Someone in row 12 yelped. A kid started crying. I gripped the armrest, and he just sat there, hands folded in his lap, staring straight ahead. The pilot's voice crackled over the speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a patch of rough air. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. The lights dimmed slightly. That always made me feel weird, like we just slid one step closer to a horror movie. My seatmate hadn't moved. His eyes were open wide, unblinking. You ever think about how easy it would be? He asked suddenly. What? I snapped. To open the emergency door mid-air. I turned to him sharply. What the hell is wrong with you? He didn't blink. I used to sit in the exit row sometimes, just to feel it, the handle. My throat tightened. You know you can't actually open it mid-flight, right? I muttered. He smiled. You sure? I sat frozen for a while after that, gripping the armrest like it was the only thing tethering me to sanity. We started descending an hour later. The captain didn't say anything about it. No update. No cheerful, we'll be landing shortly. Just the subtle tilt of the cabin nose down, the soft hum of the engines changing pitch. The sky outside was dark, too dark. Then the lights flickered, not off but a quick dip in brightness, like someone breathing shallow. A low crackle came through the speakers, but no voice followed. Then the flight attendant walked past us, quickly. No drink cart, no smile. Then another, both of them whispering to each other. Nervous. Something was wrong. I sat up straighter. Hey, I said to the guy beside me, what's going on? But he wasn't in his seat. My stomach flipped. His duffel was gone. I craned my neck, looking toward the back of the plane. There he was, standing by the lavatory, talking to a woman in a flight crew uniform. Except she wasn't a flight attendant, not one I'd seen earlier. They were whispering. He passed her something from his pocket. She nodded, then turned and went into the cockpit. My whole body went cold. I undid my seatbelt and stood, moving fast toward the front. A few passengers glanced up, frowning. A hand grabbed my wrist. "Sir," the flight attendant said, blocking me, "you need to remain seated. There's a guy. He's not supposed to be here. I think he gave something to—" I stopped. She was staring at me with this expression, blank, unreadable. "You need to sit down," she repeated. "Now." Something was very wrong. We didn't land in Portland. We didn't land at all. The captain's voice came on again. Low, slurred. Folks, we'll be making a short deviation. Nothing to worry about." Passengers started murmuring. Then the woman from before came out of the cockpit. She wasn't wearing a name badge. Her lips were moving fast like she was talking to herself. She had something in her hand, a hypodermic needle. My heart went ice cold. I moved down the aisle, pushing past people now. A man grabbed my arm, my seatmate. He'd come back. "Matt," he said calmly, "this isn't your flight anymore." I shoved him hard. He stumbled back, crashing into another row. "Let me out," I shouted. "He's not who he says he is. He's got something." No one moved, not one person. Every face stared forward, blank, like puppets. The flight attendant stepped toward me again. "You need to calm down, sir." She had something in her hand now, too. A syringe. I bolted. Down the aisle toward the galley, yanked the curtain. The door to the cockpit was ajar. Inside, the captain was slumped sideways, eyes open, not blinking. The co-pilot's seat was empty, and in the corner, my seatmate, smiling. He turned slowly to face me. "You wanted to go home," he said softly, "but you forgot. You left that behind years ago." Then everything went dark. I woke up screaming, oxygen mask on my face, lights flashing, people yelling. We'd landed. Not in Portland, not anywhere near it. Salt Lake City, emergency medical crews, police. They said I'd had a psychotic break, said I attacked a flight attendant, tried to storm the cockpit. I know what I saw. But here's the worst part. They never found him. No record of anyone in 19B, no bag, no name, nothing. Flight manifest showed the seat as empty, but I remember the smile, the dream. And sometimes when I close my eyes at night, I hear it again. That voice, quiet, behind me. "This isn't your flight anymore." Story 5. I always hated flying, not because of the turbulence or the recycled air or the claustrophobic rows of strangers packed together like luggage. I hated it because flying meant transition, movement, leaving something behind, and I had just started getting used to the idea of staying still. That August, I had just turned 23 and was heading back to Portland after spending 3 long, complicated months with my mother in Denver. She'd been diagnosed with early-onset Parkinson's the previous winter, and everything in our world seemed to crack in slow motion after that. I dropped out of my graduate program, moved in with her, took over the grocery lists and pill schedules and insurance calls while trying not to fall apart myself. But after her condition stabilized and my older brother Miles promised to move in for a while, I finally booked my flight home. It was a small win, a breath, a way of reclaiming my life without feeling like I was abandoning hers. I took a Delta evening flight out of DIA, nonstop to PDX. Terminal A was crowded, the kind of hot and loud that makes your skin itch. Kids crying, business guys talking too loud into their phones. Teenagers filming themselves dancing in front of Gate 38 for some TikTok trend I didn't understand. I found an empty seat near the window and watched the planes taxi in the distance, sipping a too-sweet airport latte, trying to ignore the tightness in my chest. I texted my roommate Beth to let her know I'd land a little after 9. Me, boarding now. Beth, woohoo, can't wait to get you drunk again. LOL. Me, please no shots this time. Beth, zero promises. Boarding started at 6:42 p.m. sharp. I'd picked an aisle seat when I booked, 17C. It was one of the few still available that didn't cost extra. No upgrades, no extra legroom, Just basic economy. The line moved slow, the way it always does when people forget how bags and overhead compartments work. I waited my turn, let the flight attendant scan my pass, then made my way down the jet bridge and onto the plane. The air changed immediately. That familiar dry, slightly metallic airplane smell hit me. Fabric, plastic, and just a hint of something chemical. I squeezed down the aisle until I found row 17. A woman was already in the window seat. Mid-30s maybe, short brown hair, earbuds in. She didn't glance up. The middle seat was empty. I stuffed my backpack under the seat and sat down, buckling my belt out of habit. I leaned back and exhaled, and that's when he arrived. "Hey," he said, smiling like we were old friends. "17B?" He looked about my age, maybe a little older. Slender, tall, pale. His hair was dark and combed too neatly, like it was trying to hide how thin it was getting. His clothes looked normal, jeans, faded blue hoodie, but something about him immediately felt off, too aware of himself, too practiced. Still, I moved my legs so he could pass, and he sat down beside me. "You from Denver?" he asked, turning toward me slightly. "No," I said, trying to keep it polite but short. "Portland." He smiled. "Cool, I'm from Bend originally, but I live in Aurora now." I nodded, hoping that was the end of it. "I'm Mason, by the way." I didn't want to give him my name, not because he seemed dangerous, just persistent. But politeness won. "Rachel." He repeated it like he was trying it on in his mouth. "Rachel." The plane filled up. Flight attendants closed overhead, bins, gave the safety spiel, and eventually we took off. I put in my earbuds and leaned my head back, hoping he'd take the hint. But I could feel him watching me. Even with the music on low, I heard him ask, "What are you listening to?" I ignored him. He tapped my arm. Lightly, but still. "Just curious." I pulled one earbud out, slow. "Sorry, I'm not really up for talking right now," I said, forcing a smile. "It's been a long day." He nodded. "Of course, I get it. Just being friendly." I turned away, put the earbud back in, and stared at the seat in front of me. An hour into the flight, I had to pee. I stepped past him. He moved too slowly, and went to the tiny bathroom in the back. When I came out, I felt him watching again as I walked down the aisle. I sat back in my seat, adjusted my belt, and saw something new. A paper napkin had been slipped into the seat pocket in front of me, folded neatly. I hesitated, then pulled it out. One sentence, written in all caps. "You look even prettier when you're angry." My stomach twisted. I glanced over at Mason. He wasn't looking at me now, just staring straight ahead, arms crossed, expression blank. I didn't say anything. 20 minutes later, the cabin lights dimmed for night flight mode. The window seat woman had fallen asleep against the wall. A few rows up, a baby had started to cry. Somewhere behind me, someone coughed. A flight attendant pushed a cart past slowly, offering drinks. I asked for a ginger ale. Mason didn't ask for anything. When the cart passed, I took a sip, trying to calm my nerves. Then I felt his hand, on my knee, just resting there, like it belonged. I froze. "Please don't touch me," I said, my voice low and tight. He didn't move it right away, just kept looking ahead. Finally, slowly, he pulled his hand back and laughed under his breath. "You're not very nice, Rachel." I hit the call button. He chuckled. Okay, don't make a scene." A flight attendant came over. Blonde, maybe mid-50s. Name tag said Linda. "Everything all right?" she asked with that practiced flight attendant calm. "Yes," I lied. "Just think I'd like to switch seats if that's possible." She looked between us. "I'm not sure we have any open seats," she said, but she glanced around, then leaned in. "Let me check with the crew." She returned a few minutes later and motioned for me to follow her. There was one open jump seat at the back near the galley. "It's not comfortable," she warned, "but it's away from him." I took it. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I'd spend the rest of the flight in silence, bouncing in my stiff little seat, surrounded by strangers and safety. But halfway through the descent, Linda came back with her phone in hand. "I think you should see this," she said, frowning. She handed it to me. Airdrop screen. Request from Mason B. There were 12 photos queued up. Screenshots. Photos of me, some recent, today at the airport, one from the terminal seating area, one from when I was walking toward the gate, others, not. There was a photo of me walking outside a grocery store in Denver, one from a bus stop, one from my old college campus, a picture of me with my ex from 2 years ago. He'd been following me. For how long? When the plane landed, they held us on board. TSA and airport police came down the jet bridge. Mason stayed still, didn't run, didn't shout. When they escorted him off, he looked calm. He even turned and smiled at me as he passed. Not angry, not embarrassed, just satisfied. Later, the officers told me he had a small knife on him, hidden in his carry-on. Said he never pulled it out, never threatened anyone. But the photos, they were enough to open a stalking case. His real name wasn't Mason. It was Brandon T. Fields. He had priors, restraining orders from 2 other women, both in Oregon. One of them had moved across the country to get away from him. I still fly. Not often, and not without anxiety. Sometimes I'll walk through the terminal and feel 1,000 eyes even when no one's looking. But the worst part was realizing he'd gotten on that plane for me, that he'd planned it, bought a ticket, chosen that seat, waited for me to notice, and he never had to say a word to make it terrifying. Just a hand, a smile, a folded napkin with ink that never quite faded from my mind. Monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they just sit quietly beside you in seat 17B. Story 6. I never liked flying. Not because of the turbulence or the weird air pressure in your ears, or even the usual fears people have about crashing. No, for me it was the stillness. Thousands of feet above the ground, crammed into a tin can with hundreds of strangers, stuck in one place, no escape. The idea of being trapped with no control, it got under my skin. But I didn't have a choice. My mom had a stroke. She was living in Pensacola, Florida. I was in Portland, Oregon. I hadn't seen her in 3 years. There were a lot of reasons. Work, money, the fact that the last time we spoke, she told me I was a disappointment for not becoming a nurse like her. Still, when the call came, I packed a bag. My flight out was Delta 381, connecting through Dallas. Full flight, middle of summer, middle of the week. I booked it last minute. That's probably why I ended up in seat 18B. Middle seat, center row, economy. I didn't even care. I just needed to get to her. I got to the gate early, couldn't sit still. The airport was crowded, full of that dull hum airports always have. Rolling luggage, gate announcements, crying toddlers. I kept checking the time. I kept picturing her in that hospital bed. When boarding started, I filed in with everyone else, eyes on the ground, hoping I wouldn't get stuck next to someone who wanted to talk for 6 hours straight. My seatmates were already there. Window seat was taken by a woman in her late 50s, short bob, expensive-looking bag on her lap. She looked like someone who owned multiple dogs and talked to them like they were children. A soft floral perfume clung to her like humidity. On the aisle was a younger guy, maybe 25, shaggy hair and tired eyes. He gave me a nod, earbuds already in, and I took the middle seat, clutching my backpack like a lifeline. As the plane filled, I noticed something weird. Not with the passengers, with the crew. The flight attendants were off. Their smiles were just a beat too slow. The way they moved, synchronized but stiff, like they were following a script written by someone who didn't quite understand human behavior. One of them, a tall man with slick back hair and a name tag that read Dorian, walked the aisle twice before takeoff. Not offering help, just staring. I caught his eye. He didn't blink. Creepy, the guy on the aisle muttered beside me. You saw that too? I asked. He nodded. Maybe he's new. I didn't buy it, but I didn't want to be that passenger either, the one who panics before anything even happens. So I said nothing. We took off without incident. For the first hour, everything was fine. Normal. Drinks were served. People settled in. I read the same sentence in my book 6 times, my thoughts drifting to Mom. I was about to get up to stretch when the captain's voice crackled over the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, we're hitting a bit of unexpected headwind. Please fasten your seatbelts as we begin a brief descent to adjust course. Everything is perfectly normal. The word descent hit me wrong. We weren't even halfway to Dallas. Why descend? I looked out the window. The clouds looked heavier than before. Dark, bruised. The light outside was fading fast. Strange, considering it was only 2:30 p.m. The guy beside me pulled his earbuds out. "Was that weird?" he asked. "Yeah." "You fly a lot?" "No," I admitted. "You?" "First time in years," he said. "Name's Aaron." "Live." We shook hands awkwardly over the armrest. Then the plane dipped. Not turbulence, a dip, sudden and sharp. Several passengers yelped. The drink cart toppled somewhere behind us. A soda can rolled past my foot. The lights flickered, not once, twice. And then the intercom crackled again. Only this time, it wasn't the captain's voice. It was someone else. It was soft at first. A whisper. "Don't look out. Don't look out." The speaker screeched, then went dead. Aaron and I locked eyes. "Did you hear that?" I nodded. People were murmuring now, glancing at each other nervously. The flight attendants didn't say a word. They just stood in the galley, frozen like mannequins, eyes forward. I hit the call button. Nothing. Outside, the clouds were black now. Not dark gray, not stormy. Black, like someone had painted over the sky. Then came the knocking. It started behind us. Slow, rhythmic. Knock, knock, knock. From inside the walls of the plane, someone screamed. A man stood up, turned toward the back. "There's someone in the baggage hold," he shouted. A woman yelled, "Sit down!" The captain's voice returned, but it didn't sound right. It was flat, empty, like it was being read by a machine. "We are currently cruising at an altitude of 381 feet. Please remain seated." 381, Aaron said. "That can't be right." I checked the flight screen on the seat in front of me. Altitude, 381 feet. That was wrong. That was impossible. "Live," Aaron said quietly, pointing out the window. I turned. There was something on the wing. At first I thought it was ice or damage. But then it moved, crawling slowly toward the cabin. Long fingers, no eyes. Thin and gray like it had been drained of life. The woman in the window seat gasped, clutched her chest. "Oh God, oh God!" Aaron reached for the call button again. Still nothing. The lights cut out. Everything went dark. Someone shrieked, and in that darkness came a voice. Not from the speakers, from everywhere. "Don't remember, don't look, don't wake it." My blood turned to ice, and then, just like that, the lights came back on. Except some people were gone. The man who'd shouted, his seat was empty, tray table still down, his drink untouched. Where is he?" the woman behind us whispered. Nobody answered. The flight attendants moved again, but not to help. They walked slowly down the aisle, staring at each passenger one by one, as if counting. Dorian stopped beside me. His eyes were all wrong, like they had no color at all. "Seat 18B, he said softly. "Not yet." And then he moved on. I wanted to scream, to run. But run where? We were still in the air, still trapped. The clouds outside swirled unnaturally, forming shapes, faces, screaming silently. The captain's voice returned, clearer now and horribly calm. "We've adjusted our descent. Arrival imminent. Please remain in your seats for final processing." "What does that mean?" Aaron asked. The intercom buzzed. A new voice. My mother's. "Live. Don't come here. It's not a hospital. I saw it. I saw what's waiting." I clutched the armrest, heart thundering. Aaron whispered, "Live. What the hell is going on?" "I don't know. I don't know." The screen in front of me blinked. The flight map disappeared, replaced by a symbol, a door. It opened. And suddenly, I remembered. I had flown this route before, 3 years ago, with my father. We never landed. We crashed. They never found the plane, or me, because I never got off. I looked at Aaron. "We're not going to Dallas." He shook his head slowly. We're going back." "To where?" "Where we lost ourselves." The overhead bins popped open. Inside, no luggage, just darkness, endless and pulsing. And in that moment, I understood what altitude 381 meant. Not height, not distance, time. We weren't in the air. We were in between, caught in a loop, a tier, a trap. The flight attendants turned in unison. All passengers must return to their seat of origin. The lights pulsed red, the windows turned black, and one by one the rest of the passengers vanished. Gone. I grabbed Aaron's hand. We have to stay awake. He nodded. Don't look out. Don't listen. Just hold on. And we did. Until a jolt, a screech, light, sunlight. The clouds parted. The plane landed, hard. People around us stirred, yawning, stretching, laughing. The intercom buzzed. Welcome to Dallas-Fort Worth. Local time is 4:12 p.m. I turned to Aaron. He was gone. His seat, empty, like he'd never been there. I stood, hardened my throat, and followed the others off the plane. In the terminal, I saw my reflection. My eyes were darker, older. I pulled out my phone. Dozens of missed calls. From myself. The last message said, "Don't board altitude 381. It's a loop. You already flew." But it was too late. I was already back. Back where I never left. Story 7. I was 22 when it happened, and I haven't stepped foot on a plane since. At the time, I was living in Austin, Texas, in a cramped but decent apartment above a laundromat on San Pedro Street. I had just graduated with a degree in aviation logistics from the University of North Texas and had managed to land a job with Dymar Freight Lines, a cargo logistics company based out of Portland, Oregon. Not glamorous, but it was a foot in the door. My first official work assignment was in Seattle. 3 weeks of training at SeaTac, shadowing incoming freight runs and learning air manifest systems. I was excited, nervous but excited. You work that hard for a degree, and suddenly there it is, your life shifting into gear. But I didn't know back then that I'd be walking onto the last plane I'd ever ride. The flight was from Austin Bergstrom to Seattle Tacoma International, with a brief layover in Salt Lake City. I was booked on Pacific Horizon Airlines, Flight 301, an overnight red-eye, because my company was too cheap to spring for anything else. I didn't care. I'd flown alone plenty of times before. My dad dropped me off around 6:30 p.m. He helped me with my one suitcase, ruffled my hair like I was still 12, and told me to text him when I landed. My parents weren't thrilled about me moving states away, but they were trying to be supportive. We hugged. He said something corny about going where the wind takes you, and then I was through security. I boarded around 9:45. The plane was one of those mid-size Boeing 737s, about 150 seats. It wasn't full. I had the entire row to myself, 23A through 23C, left side near the wing. I remember thinking how lucky I was to stretch out, maybe even get some sleep. I didn't know how wrong I'd be. The first few hours were uneventful. We took off smoothly, the usual chatter from the pilot. Clear skies, slight headwinds, expected to land in Salt Lake around midnight. I put on my headphones, half-watched a documentary about wildfires, and dozed off around the Colorado border. That's when the turbulence started. It wasn't the normal kind, the soft dips and shakes you expect during a night flight. This felt sharper, like something hitting the plane from the outside. I woke up with a jolt when my seatbelt tugged against my waist. The plane lurched hard to the right. Overhead bins clapped open. A drink cart tipped sideways and slammed into the aisle wall. People gasped. A baby 2 rows ahead of me started screaming. The flight attendants tried to calm everyone down. Just turbulence, folks. Please remain seated. But even they looked confused, pale. One of them, a red-headed woman in her late 30s, was gripping the back of a seat so hard her knuckles had gone white. I glanced out the window. That's when I saw it. At first I thought it was just the reflection of a light, a trick of the night sky. But no, it was something else. There was a shape just outside the wing. Not a bird, not a drone. Something wrong. It hovered like a shadow, black and shifting, and yet it had weight, like it was peeling into our airspace from someplace else. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, looked again. It was still there. I must have been staring too long because the guy across the aisle leaned over and said, "You see that too?" I turned. He looked around my age. Latino, glasses, Columbia jacket. Clearly not the type to spook easily. But he looked scared. "Yeah," I said quietly. "What is that?" "No clue," he muttered. Thought I was imagining it. The lights flickered, and then we dropped. Not gradually like when descending. We dropped. Like someone had yanked the floor out from under us. People screamed. My head slammed against the seat in front of me. The oxygen mask didn't fall. Not yet. But I heard something snap from the rear of the cabin. The PA crackled on. "This is your captain." A pause. "We're experiencing unexpected turbulence. Remain seated. I repeat, remain seated." His voice didn't sound steady. I worked briefly in dispatch during college, and I'd learned to read tone. Pilots are trained to be calm. This guy wasn't calm. The turbulence continued, rhythmic now. It felt deliberate, like something was moving the plane, not just wind. The flight attendant, her name tag said Claire, unbuckled and started toward the cockpit, clutching the overhead bins for balance. I caught her arm as she passed. "What's going on?" Her eyes darted to mine. "I don't know," she whispered. "There's no storm on radar, and the comms went weird 20 minutes ago. Static and—" She stopped herself, then added, "Just stay seated." I didn't. Not because I thought I was brave, but because something in me, the same gut feeling I'd ignored once before in life, started screaming. I stood, walked up the aisle, gripping each seat back as I went. The man who'd spoken to me followed. He muttered, "If you're going, I'm not staying alone." Row after row of confused, panicked passengers, some sobbing, others praying. People on their phones, but no one had service, not even roaming. We reached the front galley. The cockpit door was open. The captain and co-pilot were gone. Just gone. Their seats were empty, control panels blinking like nothing was wrong, yoke unmanned, radio emitting a soft buzz like a dead heartbeat. Claire pushed past us, mouth open. "Where the hell—" Then we heard it, a sound behind us, wet, sticky, like feet dragging through something thick. We turned. Halfway down the aisle, something stood on all fours. At first I thought it was a person, but its limbs were too long, bent backward. Skin stretched thin over jutting bones, head tilted unnaturally sideways, like it didn't understand how necks worked. It smelled like old meat and sulfur. The man beside me whispered, "No fucking way." The thing hissed and started toward us. We ran. Claire slammed the cockpit door shut and locked it. Not like it mattered. That thing didn't need locks. It slammed into the door once, and I swear I saw metal warp. "Emergency descent," Claire gasped, fumbling with the radio. "We have to get down." "No," I said, stepping back. "We have to land. Now we can't outrun that." "But the crew—" "We have no crew," the guy in the Columbia jacket snapped. "We're it now." I glanced at the panels, my training barely enough to know what half the lights meant. I wasn't a pilot, but I knew how to read flight speed, altitude, fuel levels. Something else was flying this plane. Claire found a manual override key, flipped 2 switches, and grabbed the intercom. "Brace for emergency descent. Everyone, get to your seats. Brace." The thing slammed the door again. This time it cracked. We descended hard. Alarms blared. Altitude warnings. Stall warnings. The sky spun sideways. But the stars outside, they weren't stars anymore. They were moving, swirling, like we were cutting through something we weren't meant to fly in. The cockpit lights died. We dropped again, and everything went black. I woke up strapped in an airline seat on the edge of a snowbank. The wreckage of the fuselage spread across a frozen pine forest. Silence. Not a bird. Not wind. Just silence. I couldn't feel my legs at first. Then pain shot through me like lightning. I screamed until my voice broke. I wasn't the only one who survived. Claire was found 300 yards from the main body, unconscious, her arm broken in 3 places. The guy in the Columbia jacket, his name was Miguel, had climbed a tree with a flare and somehow flagged down a rescue chopper 2 hours later. Of the 134 people on Flight 301, 17 survived. The FAA investigation cited catastrophic electrical failure. That's all they would say. No mention of the thing, no mention of the missing crew, no answers. They pulled the black box from the wreckage, but it was blank, hours of silence. No pilot chatter, no flight logs, just static. It's been 4 years. I don't fly. I work dispatch now, back in Texas. Ground level. Closest I come to a plane is handing off manifests to cargo loaders. Every so often, I'll check the NTSB reports, see if anyone else has seen it, describe the same thing. But nothing ever comes up, only once. In a Reddit thread that's since been deleted, I saw someone mention Flight 301. Said they had a friend on that plane. Said she talked about a man made of shadows and that something followed her off the flight. They never found the captain or co-pilot. They weren't in the wreckage, not in the trees, not on any log. They simply vanished. And sometimes when I wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, I swear I can hear it again. That sticky, dragging sound coming down the aisle. Story 8. I was 29 when my life finally felt like it was settling into something close to peace. I'd spent most of my 20s running, figuratively, mostly, from jobs, relationships, cities, and, if I'm being honest, from myself. I started out working crew for music festivals up and down the West Coast, sleeping in vans, living on dollar menu breakfasts, and pretending the chaos was freedom. For a while it was, but you get older and chaos stops feeling like a badge of rebellion. It just becomes exhausting. By 29, I was based out of Nashville, working logistics for a mid-tier artist management company. I wasn't exactly rich, but I had health insurance, a condo I didn't share with strangers, and a routine that didn't involve changing time zones every week. And I had my brother, Evan. Evan and I hadn't always been close growing up. We were 4 years apart and wildly different. He was military-bound before he could legally vote. I was the kid who dyed my hair black and smoked cloves in the garage. But sometime around my mid-20s, we started calling each other again, then visiting, then texting daily. He was stationed in Colorado Springs, recently married, and had just become a father 2 months earlier. That was why I booked the flight. Evan begged me to come out, meet his baby girl, spend a long weekend in the shadow of the Rockies. I hadn't taken a vacation in 2 years, so I burned some PTO and bought a one-way ticket to Colorado Springs. The return leg was open. Something about the idea of not planning it made me feel like I could breathe again. The flight out was uneventful. I spent 4 days holding my niece and rediscovering how much I'd missed my brother's sarcastic humor. We drank cheap beer, made breakfast together, and stayed up late watching horror movies like we used to when we were teenagers. When Sunday rolled around, I booked a return flight, direct to Nashville. Seat 17A, middle of the plane, window side. I remember thinking, thank God it's not the middle seat. It was a little late, a 7:15 p.m. departure. I didn't care. I figured I'd get a whiskey from the cart, listen to a podcast, and be home in time to crash hard. But that flight, altitude 381, wasn't like any flight I'd ever been on. And I don't think I'll ever fly again after what happened. I got to the airport early, grabbed a sandwich I never ended up eating, and waited at gate B12. The boarding area was weirdly quiet. It wasn't empty, just subdued, like everyone was nursing hangovers or had just come from a funeral. Nobody said much. No loud phone calls, no kids running around, no couples fighting, just silence, broken occasionally by announcements or the shuffling of bags. The plane was a standard Boeing 737, 3 seats on each side, aisle down the middle, nothing fancy. As I stepped on board, the flight attendant at the door gave a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Welcome aboard," she said, her tone flat. I nodded, kept walking. Row 17 was smack in the middle. Window, as promised. There was a guy already in the middle seat, mid-50s, balding, wearing a fleece vest that smelled faintly of cigars. He glanced up at me but said nothing. "Hey," I said politely. He just gave a small nod. The aisle seat was still empty, so I slid into my window spot, buckled in, and tried to get comfortable. Within minutes, the rest of the plane filled in. Businessmen, college students, a couple families. No one seemed out of place. No red flags. Just a normal crowd. But I still had that tight feeling in my chest, the kind you get when something's about to go wrong, even if you don't know what. The last person to board was a woman, maybe mid-60s, with steel gray hair pulled into a long braid and a sky blue cardigan. She moved slowly, like her joints were stiff. She carried a beige tote and a plastic grocery bag. She stopped next to our row, looked down, and gave me a warm, practiced smile. "I think this one's me," she said. Sure enough, she had the aisle seat, 17C. I stood, let her in, and noticed her eyes linger on me just a second too long. Not creepy, just odd, like she was studying me, measuring something. "Long day?" I offered once we were both seated. She smiled again. You could say that, and that was it, until snack service. We hit cruising altitude and the cart came down the aisle. I passed on the drinks, just asked for a ginger ale. The woman next to me pulled a small container from her tote, Tupperware. She clicked it open with slow, delicate fingers. Inside were cookies, round, homemade, dusted with sugar. "You want one?" she asked, tilting the container slightly toward me. I gave a polite laugh. "Tempting, but I'm gluten sensitive." Her smile didn't falter. "They're almond flour, no wheat." I blinked. "Seriously?" She nodded. "I bake a lot. Keeps my hands busy. These are almond flour, honey, sea salt, a little cardamom." I hesitated. I don't normally take food from strangers, but something about her felt familiar. Safe even. "Thing," I said, and took one. She watched me eat it, not in a weird way, just with interest. I nodded as I chewed. "These are amazing." "I'm glad," she said. I finished the cookie, sipped my ginger ale, and reclined just a little. The hum of the plane, the soft overhead lights, the white noise of passengers flipping through magazines, it all blended together. My eyes drifted shut. That's when the screaming started. It wasn't a loud scream at first, just a strangled gasp from somewhere up front, then another, this time from the back. I opened my eyes. People were shifting in their seats, turning toward the sounds. A man stood in the aisle near row 10, hunched forward, clutching his stomach. Then he vomited, not like a sick cough or motion sickness. It was sudden, violent, dark red liquid gushing down his shirt and onto the floor. A woman screamed. Then another person in the back started shaking, their tray rattling as they gripped it with twitching fingers. The flight attendants were moving now fast, but no announcements came. No instructions, just chaos. The man in 10C collapsed into the aisle, convulsing. His eyes rolled back. Blood trickled from his nose. I shot to my feet, heart slamming. "What the hell is happening?" I gasped, turning to the woman next to me. She was calm. Too calm. She reached down, clicked her Tupperware shut, and placed it back into her tote. "You should sit," she said softly. My stomach turned. "You? What did you put in those cookies?" Her smile returned, smaller this time. "Not everyone reacts the same," she whispered. My vision narrowed. People were shouting now, crying. A man staggered past us toward the lavatory, hit the wall and crumpled. "Help! Somebody help him!" Someone screamed. I lunged into the aisle, shoving past her. "Attendant!" I yelled. "Something's wrong. She gave me food." But the flight attendant, the one from boarding, was pale, trembling, her eyes wide with shock. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the cockpit. The door had opened, and the pilot was slumped in the frame, a thin line of blood tracing from his lips to his collar. Panic erupted. The second officer dragged the body back into the cockpit and slammed the door shut. Over the PA, a voice cracked and broke. "This is your first officer. We have a medical emergency on board. Please remain seated." People were on their feet now, crying, praying, vomiting. The air stank of bile and blood and something else, something chemical. And I wasn't coughing, wasn't shaking, just cold. I turned back to the woman. "What the hell did you do?" She looked at me calmly, folding her hands in her lap like she was waiting for church to start. "You said your brother just had a baby." I froze. "How do you know that?" "I know a lot about people," she said. "What they need, what they fear, what they pass on." "What are you talking about?" "You're clean," she said. "Your body won't react. Not like theirs." "React to what?" "The correction." My skin went cold. "You poisoned everyone?" "I gave them a chance," she whispered. "Some don't deserve it. Some do." The intercom crackled again. "We're initiating emergency landing protocol. Please." The lights flickered. People were collapsing now, rows of them, like puppets with their strings cut. And somehow, I was still standing. We made an emergency landing in Kansas. Fire trucks, ambulances, hazmat suits. They evacuated us row by row. There were only 13 of us still conscious. 6 died on the ground. I told the authorities everything. About the woman, the cookies, her words. They searched the plane. She wasn't there. There was no record of her on the manifest. No luggage. No ID. They questioned me for hours, ran tests, cleared me. No poison in my system. Not a trace. They never found her. It's been 7 months. I still work logistics, though I drive everywhere now. Evan stopped flying too. Not after what happened to his little girl. Yeah, she got sick the night I arrived. Some kind of neurological event. The doctors couldn't explain it. She didn't survive the week. Sometimes I wonder if I brought it with me. Something on my clothes, in my breath. Sometimes I still dream of her. Cardigan blue as the sky outside that window, hair in a long gray braid, eyes watching, always watching. Every time I pass a bakery, every time someone offers me something homemade, I remember her voice. "You're clean," she said, like it was a gift, like it was a curse. Story 9. I was 29 when I booked the flight that changed everything. At the time, life felt like a glass I was trying not to drop. My mother had passed the year before, after a long battle with pancreatic cancer. I'd spent months sleeping in a hospital chair, signing paperwork with numb fingers, and holding her hand through drugged-up silences. After the funeral, my sister moved in with her boyfriend, and the family home was sold off. Just like that, my roots were gone. I'd moved to a studio apartment in Sacramento, working 50-hour weeks as a systems analyst for a mid-tier tech firm. The job was fine. The people were fine. I was fine. That's what I kept telling myself. The truth was, I needed a break, something that wasn't gray walls and blinking monitors. So when my college friend Lindsay invited me to her wedding in Asheville, North Carolina, I didn't hesitate. A week away, a clean hotel bed, maybe even some laughter. It sounded like exactly what I needed. I booked a red-eye flight out of SFO, one connection in Denver, then straight to Asheville. I picked the seat closest to the wing, 21F window seat. I've always preferred them. Something about watching the ground fall away makes me feel in control, like I'm choosing to rise. The plane boarded just past 11 p.m. The gate area had been surprisingly full for a Thursday night, delayed flights and storm reroutes, from what I overheard. When they called our group, I filed in behind a guy in a faded hoodie who smelled like fast food and jet fuel. Nothing unusual, just the usual mess of tired travelers and recycled air. My seatmate was a girl who looked barely 18. Wide green eyes, oversized sweater, bitten nails. She was clutching a paperback so tightly the pages crinkled. I gave a polite smile, buckled in, and pulled out my headphones. The captain's voice crackled overhead just after takeoff. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 2099 with direct service to Denver. We'll be cruising at 36,000 feet. Weather's smooth. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride." For the first hour, everything was normal. Cabin lights dimmed, people slept or scrolled through their phones. I dozed a little, chin to my chest, dreaming half-lucid nonsense about my mom cooking spaghetti in an airport terminal. Then turbulence hit. Not heavy, just a brief jolt, enough to shake my water bottle. The girl next to me flinched so hard her book dropped. I helped her grab it from the floor. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded too quickly. "Yeah, not a good flyer." I smiled. "You and half this plane." She laughed, a weak sound, then whispered, "Can I ask you something weird?" I blinked. "Sure." She leaned in slightly, her voice barely audible. "Did you hear the captain say where we were going?" "Yeah," I said. "Denver." "Then for me, Asheville." Her face fell. "That's not what I heard." What did you hear? She hesitated. He said, we're not going to Denver. He said, welcome aboard Flight 2099. Final destination unknown. My stomach tightened. Maybe you misheard. She gave a small shake of her head, then pulled out her phone and scrolled to a voice memo app. I record all flights for anxiety. She played it. The captain's voice was clear, too clear. Welcome aboard Flight 2099. Final destination unknown. I sat still. My mouth felt dry. I wanted to rationalize it, to tell her it was fake, edited, anxiety-fueled paranoia. But I'd been awake when the announcement played, and I didn't remember hearing that. Maybe it was a glitch, I said. Old recording or something. She didn't reply, just stared at the aisle. I looked up, uneasy. The cabin felt wrong. Not dramatically, just too quiet. No cart rattling, no murmurs of conversation, not even the low hum of the intercom. Just a stillness that pressed into your ears like altitude pressure. Most passengers looked asleep, some with necks at strange angles. One guy 2 rows up had his forehead pressed hard against the window, unmoving. A flight attendant walked past and I almost called out, until I noticed her expression. It was blank. Not bored, blank, like she wasn't seeing anything. Her hands moved in a practiced rhythm, adjusting bags in overhead compartments, smoothing out an empty seat back. But her eyes didn't blink. Not once. Excuse me? I called softly. She paused. Her head turned toward me. I don't know how to explain it. Her face didn't move, but her eyes locked on mine with such intensity I physically recoiled. Bathroom, I croaked, just to say something. She nodded once. A slow, mechanical gesture, then continued walking. The girl beside me whispered, something's wrong. I didn't disagree. I stood, stepping into the aisle. Nobody moved, not even a cough or a twitch. I started walking slowly toward the back, heart hammering. Row after row of sleeping passengers, too still. I reached the rear galley, empty. One of the bathroom doors was ajar. Inside, the mirror was shattered. Not cracked, shattered, but not a single shard on the sink or floor. Just empty space and a hollow metallic smell. I turned to go back and froze. The flight attendant was blocking the aisle behind me. Her lips parted slightly. Please return to your seat, Mr. Halston. I hadn't given my name. She didn't blink. Please, I said. Return to your seat, Mr. Halston, she repeated. Her voice was wrong now, like a recording looped too many times. I backed up, then ran. Back to my row, heart in my throat. I slid in, breath ragged. The girl was staring straight ahead, pale. She talked to you, didn't she? I nodded. She looked down at her hands. I don't think we're on a normal flight. That's when we heard it. A low groaning, like metal twisting. Then a sharp drop, fast, violent. Screams erupted around the cabin as the lights flickered. Then blackness, total blackness. The plane leveled, the lights came back, and suddenly everything changed. Passengers were awake now, but not panicked, not questioning, smiling. Every single one of them smiling, like they'd heard a joke only they understood. Even the toddler in 17C was grinning with blank, two-wide eyes. The intercom buzzed. This is your captain speaking. Thank you for your patience. We've reached a cruising altitude of 37,000 feet. The view outside the left window is breathtaking. I turned. Outside, the sky was black. Not night black. Black like oil, like no stars had ever existed. The wing wasn't reflecting light anymore. It wasn't even metal. It looked charred, warped, as if the entire aircraft had passed through something it shouldn't have. The girl was shaking now. This isn't real. This isn't real. It is, I whispered. How do we get off? I don't know. I pulled out my phone. No service, no Wi-Fi, just a flickering error code on the screen. No network. 000 to infinity. She clutched my arm. My name's Emma, she whispered, just in case. I'm Caleb, I said, my voice hoarse. Something screamed from the back of the plane, not a human sound. We turned and saw the flight attendant crouched on the ceiling. Ceiling. Her limbs were contorted, too long, her neck craned at an impossible angle. Her face hung inches from a man's head, and he didn't react. She opened her mouth and bit. No blood. Just silence as her jaw clamped down, and the man began to wither. Not die, wither, like his life was being sucked out of him like smoke. Emma clutched my hand. "We have to do something." I stood, shouted. "Hey!" The creature froze. Its head snapped toward me, and then it launched. I dove across the aisle, grabbing an emergency flashlight from the overhead. Emma screamed as it landed where I'd been seconds before. I swung hard. The light hit its face and it shrieked. Not from pain, from fury. Like I'd interrupted its feeding. Its skin bubbled in the beam of the flashlight. I aimed again, chasing it back. That's when I noticed the emergency exit light. Row 23. Emma met my eyes. "We won't survive opening that up here." "I know," I said, "but I don't think we're at 37,000 feet anymore." We ran. The cabin was warping now, passengers' eyes glowing faintly, their mouths moving in unison. A low chant in a language I didn't recognize. I reached the door, yanked the cover. The handle was cold, too cold. Emma hesitated. "If we die, we won't." I pulled. There was no wind, no pressure drop, just a hole, an open black void that pulsed with light and sound and something worse. The creature behind us screamed. Emma looked at me. "Jump! Jump!" We held hands and jumped. I woke up on the floor of a hospital room in Kansas City. They said I'd been found unconscious on a freight runway. No ID, no record of any flight. Emma was found 5 miles away in a drainage ditch, muttering about shadows with teeth. We were treated for dehydration, delusion. They blamed the heat, trauma. Flight 2099 never existed. The airline said there was no such number, no such path. My boarding pass was blank when I showed it to the nurse. Emma and I met once after that. Coffee shop, shaky hands, quiet. She asked me if I ever flew again. I told her no. Sometimes on sleepless nights, I turn on my phone and stare at the "no network 000 to infinity" message that still flashes when I hold it under the moonlight. And sometimes, just sometimes, I hear that voice again. "This is your captain speaking. Thank you for choosing Flight 2099. Your final destination remains unknown."